Welcome to HH28, where we unravel the secrets of self-discovery and matchmaking. We are Hugh and Heather,
two master holistic guides dedicated to helping you navigate the worlds of numerology, astrology, and personality in pursuit of meaningful connections.
Hey everyone, and welcome to a deep dive on, well, you guessed it, INTPs. Specifically, we're going deep on compatibility. We've got some super interesting material to unpack today about this personality type and really who's a good match for them romantically. So get ready because we're about to jump right in.
All right. Sounds fun. INTPs are definitely unique, that's for sure, especially in how they see the world.
You can say that again. Thinkers, or sometimes architects, because they're so into ideas and innovation. But get this, they're also introverted.
It's not just about relationships being interesting for them. It's fundamental to what makes them tick, especially when it comes to compatibility. And their introversion isn't shyness. It's about how they recharge the They need that inner world of thoughts and theories.
Okay, so then how does that actually work when they're looking for a partner? Because what I'm also seeing in this, they love logic, like really love it, and they're all about objective analysis. It almost seems like truth outranks emotions for them, which, I don't know, has to make for some interesting dynamics.
It does. It really does. And that's what those compatibility charts everyone loves can be really eye-opening. It's not like you just find someone who has all the same hobbies or whatever. It's about getting how an INTP's strengths and weaknesses actually play out with another personality type.
All right, you've got me hooked. So tell me, who are these perfect matches for our INTP friends? Give me the top picks.
Okay, drum roll, please. At the top, we've got INTJ, then ENTP, INFJ, and this one might be surprising, other INTPs.
Whoa, okay, there's a lot to unpack there. So let's take it one by one. What about INTJs? What makes them such a good match?
So each pairing has its own, special something. INTJs are all about strategy, really big on structure, which at first you might think, how does that work with an INTP who seem to love abstract ideas?
Exactly. Because we always picture INTPs as these go-with-the-flow creative types. So help me understand, how does that pairing actually work?
Okay, so picture it like this. The INTJ brings the organization, that solid framework, and that lets the INTP's imagination go wild, but within some boundaries. It's like they help take all those what-if questions and turn them into how-to plans.
Wow, I love how you put that. It's like an architect who finally found the perfect contractor who gets their vision right. But what about ENTPs? Aren't they extroverts? That seems like, I don't know, a bit of a wild card.
You'd think so, right? But here's the thing. ENTPs are also all about ideas. They love a good debate, a lively discussion. They're that spark of energy that can pull an INTP out of their head and into a conversation that's actually mentally stimulating, which INTPs crave.
So it's about that shared intellectual curiosity, wanting to explore new ideas together.
Exactly. Now, this next one, this might surprise you even more, INFJs.
Okay, hit me.
They're known for being super insightful, empathetic, really in tune with their emotions. Not exactly the first things that come to mind when you think of an INTP.
You're telling me. It seems like a total mismatch. Like, where's the common ground?
That's what's so cool about this pairing. It's all about balance. That INFJ's empathy, that emotional intelligence they bring to the table, it actually helps round out the INTP's logical, sometimes overly logical approach to things. And it makes for a surprisingly harmonious relationship.
So it's less about being exactly alike and more about complementing each other's strengths. I kind of love that, like that saying opposites attract, but here it's more like opposites creating a fuller picture.
You got it. And finally, we have the most obvious one, INTP with another INTP. Seems like a no-brainer, yeah. Similar interests, same way of seeing the world. What could be better?
It's like looking in a mirror, but I'm not going to lie, I can also see how that could lead to some issues, like too much of the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. Even with all that common ground, the source material does mention one potential downside. Let's just say two INTPs might need to put in extra effort on the actually getting things done part of life.
Two heads full of amazing ideas are great until someone's got to actually make those ideas happen. I can see how that could be an issue.
For sure. Because even the most brilliant minds need, some structure to really thrive.
Yeah.
But we've talked about those great matches, the ones that just work. What about the opposite? What about those pairings that might need a little more effort?
Okay, because I think knowing what doesn't work well is just as important. So who are the potentially challenging matches? Lay it on me.
All right, well, at the top of the list, we've got ESFJ. They're often described as social butterflies. They get energy from social interaction, expressing their emotions, and creating harmony in, well, everything. All great things, but
But maybe a little intense for our INTP friends who really value their alone time and need that space to think, right?
Exactly. That constant need for being around people for an INTP, it can be seriously draining. It can cause conflict, misunderstanding, you name it. And it goes beyond just introvert versus extrovert. It's deeper than that. Remember how we talked about INTPs loving those abstract ideas, always exploring possibilities? ESFJs are the opposite. They're grounded in the here and now, all about the concrete details, the practical stuff.
Okay, yeah, I can totally see how that could be a communication nightmare. It's like they're speaking completely different languages.
That's a really good way to put it. And speaking of contrasting dynamics, let's talk about ISFJs.
All right, tell me more.
Like ESFJs, they're driven by feelings, but they're more introverted. They really value deep one-on-one connections and having a sense of security.
Again, great qualities, but I can already see how that might clash with an INTP who's more independent and tends to, lead with logic over emotions. Am I on the right track here?
You are. You're totally getting it. ISFJs crave a level of emotional intimacy that an INTP might not naturally give. And that's not to say INTPs don't have deep feelings, but showing them in a way that an ISFJ understands, that can be tricky.
So it's about recognizing those differences and being willing to bridge that gap. Okay, that makes sense. Who else is on this potentially challenging list?
Well, next up is a pairing that honestly might make some people nervous just thinking about it. We're talking about ESTJs.
Ooh, okay. Tell me more. What are they like?
They're practical, super organized, rule-oriented, basically the kings and queens of structure and tradition.
And we both know how much our INTP friends love to challenge the rules. I can already see the sparks flying.
You're not wrong. That clash between ESTJ's love of rules and INTP's independent nature, that's practically guaranteed to cause some friction. Just picture them trying to plan a vacation together. The ESTJ has a detailed itinerary down to the minute, while the INTP just wants to go with the flow and see what happens.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like a recipe for disaster. Talk about a vacation from hell. All right, last but not least on this list of potentially challenging matches, who do we have?
We're ending with ENFJs. Now, at first glance, they might seem like a good match. They're charismatic, compassionate, natural leaders, and like INTPs, they enjoy thinking big and exploring new ideas. But there's a key difference.
I'm listening. Tell me more.
ENFJs, they lead with their heart. They're driven by their values, by a deep sense of empathy. INTPs, totally different. They prioritize logic, objective analysis. They lead with their head, not their heart.
Okay, so while they both might enjoy brainstorming or thinking about the bigger picture, how they actually make decisions, how they process emotions, it's like they're on completely different wavelengths.
Exactly. And that is where things can get tricky. Now, I'm not saying this pairing can never work, but it would take a ton of understanding, a willingness to truly appreciate those core differences.
So it seems like self-awareness is crucial in any relationship, no matter what your MBTI type is. But we've given our listeners a lot to think about. What does all of this compatibility talk mean for them? How can they actually use this knowledge?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And that's the perfect place to transition into the next part of our deep dive.
So we've covered a lot of ground on these different compatibility pairings, but it makes you wonder, what does all this actually mean for our listeners? Are we saying they should just find a partner based on matching personality types?
That's the thing. It's not about taking these compatibility assessments as a guaranteed recipe for finding the one. It's more about, really understanding yourself and your potential partners on a deeper level.
So less about destiny and more about making informed choices in our relationships.
Exactly. Think of it like this understanding MBTI compatibility. It's like having a map for this crazy journey we call relationships. It shows you the potential detours, the scenic routes, but ultimately you're the one creating the journey.
I love that analogy. It takes the pressure off needing to find that perfect match and instead encourages being more mindful, more self-aware in our relationships.
Absolutely. And that's where the real magic happens, when you really get your own strengths, your weaknesses, and how those might work with another person's. That's how you build better communication and empathy.
It's like even if you're coming from different places, you can still speak the same language, right? You can kind of predict those challenges and figure out how to handle them.
Totally. Imagine an INTP who knows they tend to get lost in their thoughts, paired with an ESFJ who's all about social interaction.
Yeah.
If they both get that about each other, they can, Plan for alone time and social time, making sure everyone's needs are met.
Wow, that's a perfect example of how being self-aware, knowing your partner's personality style, it can actually prevent fights instead of causing them.
100%. It's being proactive, not just reacting when things get tough. And it's not just about avoiding arguments. It's about really getting each other and appreciating what makes you different.
So it's not, do we check the same boxes, but more like, do we understand what's in the boxes?
Yeah.
Both ours and theirs.
Exactly. And being cool with those differences. Because let's be real, relationships are messy, even when you're super compatible on paper.
So true. Okay, so we've talked about how this helps us understand ourselves and our partners better. But what about single people? Like, how can they use this while dating?
Oh, it's super useful for dating. For one, it helps narrow down the options. If you're an INTP who thrives on deep conversations, you probably don't want to go on a date with someone whose profile picture is just them at a party, right?
Okay, that's hilarious, but so true. It's about looking for those shared values, those aligned preferences, even from the very first date.
Exactly. Saves a lot of time and energy in the long run. But even more importantly, it helps you go into dating with your eyes open. If you know there might be some bumps in the road based on your personality differences, you won't be as surprised when they pop up.
So, no more rose-colored glasses. Go into it knowing that no one is perfect and every relationship takes work.
Exactly. But knowing what kind of work you might be signing up for, that's huge.
So it's using this knowledge to grow, both on our own and with someone else.
Totally. It's about self-discovery, understanding each other, and embracing the fact that human connection is, well, complicated.
Now, you mentioned that even the best pairings have challenges, and we've talked about what can go wrong in less compatible matches. But are there any common challenges that even those ideal pairings might face?
Such a good question. And it proves that no relationship is perfect,
Because at the end of the day, we all have our own baggage and little quirks, right?
For sure. And sometimes, even when those quirks seem to fit together, they can still clash. Like, take two INTPs. Shared love for ideas, for exploring intellectually. But you know what they might struggle with? Communication.
Wait, really? That seems counterintuitive. If they're so similar, shouldn't they be able to read each other's minds?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But INTPs, they're famous for getting stuck in their heads. They might assume their partner just knows what they're thinking or feeling without actually saying it out loud.
Oh, so it's that classic communication trap. You're so busy thinking, you forget to actually talk to each other?
Yep. And that can lead to misunderstandings, resentment, just a whole lot of unnecessary drama.
So even in the most compatible pairings, you got to make communication a priority. It's not just speaking the same language, it's making sure you're on the same page.
Absolutely. It takes effort from both people, active listening, and allowing yourself to be vulnerable with each other.
Showing up for each other, even when it's hard or inconvenient. But this is getting deep, even for us. What does the source material say about all this?
Well, one super interesting thing it points out is how INTPs are often drawn to partners who challenge them intellectually.
Which makes sense, right? They love that mental stimulation, exploring new ideas. But how does that work long term? Doesn't all that intellectual debate eventually lead to, real conflict?
That's the big question, isn't it? Yeah, it definitely adds another layer, right? It's that classic question, can all that mental sparring actually make a relationship stronger, or does it just chip away at it over time?
Right, because a little debate, that's one thing. But when does it go from fun to, constant bickering? Our listeners need some advice here. So how do you actually navigate that line? What does the source material say?
Well, the big thing it emphasizes is mutual respect. Like, you both genuinely love exploring ideas, but it's not about proving the other person wrong or needing to have the last word. It's more about, actually listening to each other and valuing different perspectives.
So less about winning and more about learning and growing together as a couple.
Exactly. A good way to think about it is imagine a game of chess. Both players are super smart. They're trying to outmaneuver each other, but there's also that underlying respect for the other person's skill.
Okay, I really like that analogy. It takes the pressure off, It's not about being right. It's about enjoying the game. But what about when things do get a little heated? How can an INTP who's all about logic, how can they deal with those big emotions?
Self-awareness is key. They have to remember that even though they might process things logically, their partner might not. It's like learning to speak each other's love languages in a way.
So it's bridging that gap between logic and feelings, remembering that both are important in a relationship.
Exactly. And it's not just on the INTP to change either. Their partner also needs to get that sometimes the INTP needing space or being really direct, it's not personal, it's just how they operate.
It's like meeting in the middle, right? Understanding those differences and figuring out how to make it work for both of you.
100%. And that's what's so cool about relationships, right? They push us to grow, both on our own and as a couple. We get out of our comfort zones and start seeing things from a whole new perspective.
And hey, maybe all that intellectual friction, it's not a bad thing. Maybe it's actually what brings you closer.
Right. At the end of the day, relationships are about so much more than finding someone who checks all the boxes on your list. It's about that human connection, accepting the good with the, well, maybe not so good, and helping each other become the best versions of yourselves.
Love that. So for our listeners who are super into this whole INTP compatibility thing, what's the one thing you want them to remember? What's the big takeaway?
Knowledge is power. When you understand your own personality, when you know the good and the bad that comes with different MBTI pairings, it's like you're giving yourself the tools to build stronger, more fulfilling relationships.
It's like you said earlier, go into it with your eyes open, be curious, and accept that human connection is messy and complicated and, well, amazing.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And there you have it, our deep dive into the world of INTP compatibility. We've covered the dream matches, the pairings that might take a bit more work, and how important self-awareness and communication are in any relationship. We want to hear from you what really resonated with you today. Share your thoughts in the comments, and until next time, happy exploring.